Pacific Air Limited, stopping at Honolulu, Midway, Wake, Guam, Manila, all aboard.
October 2011 will mark the 75th anniversary of the inaugural China Clipper passenger flight, which opened the Pacific to the first regular trans-Pacific commercial air service. This plaque was dedicated November 22nd, 1985 at Middle Lock, Pearl City, the original landing site of the China Clipper, by employees of Pan American World Airways during ceremonies honoring 50 years of trans-Pacific service by Pan American. The first non-stop flight to Honolulu was attempted just 10 years prior to the start of the China Clipper flights in 1935. Navy Captain John Rogers attempted to fly a seaplane from San Francisco to Honolulu in September 1925. The flight depended on flying dead downwind, that is, with strong trade winds behind. Unfortunately, the flight was late in the summer when the trade winds are not as strong, and the plane was forced to make a dangerous open ocean landing to refuel. They failed to rendezvous with their refueling ship. After a 10-day search, Captain Rogers and his crew were assumed lost at sea, but they completed their mission by sailing their disabled plane as a sailboat 300 miles to Kauai. Honolulu's new territorial airport was named John Rogers Airport in his honor. It has since been renamed Honolulu International Airport. The Pacific was not Pan American's original goal. The passage between America and Europe was the most prestigious and profitable passenger route in the world. The British government blocked Pan Am's use of intermediate bases in Newfoundland until a British airline could be made ready for reciprocal service, a desire that never materialized. By mid-1934, Pan Am had 3 Sikorsky S-42 Clippers already in its fleet, and 3 Martin M130s about to be delivered, and no permission to cross the Atlantic. With almost $2 million invested in transoceanic airliners, Pan Am needed an ocean to cross, and so the airline turned its eyes to the Pacific. Flying the Pacific presented a much greater challenge than crossing the Atlantic. The routes across the Atlantic were relatively short, and it was even possible to follow an extreme northern route where the longest over-water leg would be 496 miles between Greenland and Iceland. Even the direct route from Newfoundland to Ireland, which avoided the harsh weather of the far north, was under 2,000 miles. But the distance from San Francisco to Honolulu was almost 2,400 miles, and the next leg of the Pacific crossing, from the cable station at Midway to the next inhabitable island at Guam, was even further. So the real obstacle to a route across the Pacific was the distance between Midway and Guam. Desperate to put his planes to work crossing an ocean, Juan Trippe, president of Pan Am, searched for a solution. In studying 19th century clipper ship logs in the New York Public Library, he found a little-known uninhabited coral atoll named Wake Island. Claimed by the United States in 1899, but deserted and virtually forgotten, Wake was just 1,200 miles from Midway and within reach of Guam, the perfect stepping stone to cross the Pacific, and still used to this day as an alternate landing site for trans-Pacific airliners. So Pan Am's route across the Pacific was set. San Francisco to Honolulu, 2,390 miles. Honolulu to Midway, 1,380 miles. Midway to Wake, 1,260 miles. Wake to Guam, 1,560 miles. Guam to Manila, 1,610 miles. Before Pan Am could begin flying the Pacific, however, it needed to develop bases. Wake was completely deserted, and neither Midway nor Guam had facilities for Pan Am's aircraft, passengers, crew, and navigation and weather equipment. So in early 1935, Pan Am leased the freighter North Haven and carefully packed it with all the items required to develop 5 air bases across the Pacific, prefabricated hotels and support buildings, construction equipment, motorboats, long-distance direction-finding equipment, tractors, refrigerators, diesel-electric generators, windmills, water storage and gasoline tanks, radios, and even a small-gauge train, a 4-month supply of food, 250,000 gallons of aviation fuel, and about 120 laborers, engineers, demolition experts, and other workers. A ton of dynamite was added in Honolulu to clear the lagoons for flying boat operations. In 1935, even while its crews were still constructing the support bases, Pan Am made its first Pacific survey flights. Since the M130 Clippers ordered from the Glenn L. Martin Company were a year behind schedule, the largest flying boat available was the Sikorsky S-42. The S-42 had been designed for the Atlantic and barely had the range to fly the longer distances of the Pacific. It was only able to make the 2,400-mile flight to Hawaii with its passenger accommodation stripped out and replaced with auxiliary fuel tanks in the passenger cabin. But determined to push ahead, on April 17, 1935, Pan Am sent the Pan American Clipper, a stripped-down S-42 under the command of Captain Edwin Musick, on a survey flight from San Francisco to Honolulu. Honolulu received her first official consignment of federal mail when R.O.D. Sullivan, executive officer of the Pan American Clipper, turned over the government bags to John H. Wilson, U.S. Postmaster, at Honolulu 18 hours after the mail's dispatch in California. John H. Wilson was president of EAH in 1921-22 and mayor of Honolulu. Over the next year, Pan Am continued to fly the Pacific, carrying mail and freight and gaining experience on the route, while preparing hotels and other passenger facilities at Midway and Wake. Pan Am prepared the path across the Pacific with stripped-down S-42 Clippers when the long-delayed Martin M130 was finally delivered on October 9, 1935. Just 2 days after its first test flight, Pan Am wasted no time before commencing Pacific service. Less than 6 weeks after taking delivery of its first M130, the China Clipper, Pan Am was ready to begin regular air mail and freight service from San Francisco to Manila.